Have you ever looked at your heating bill and felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather? What if I told you that people who lived 8 centuries ago, without electricity, thermostats, or insulation, knew how to stay warmer than most of us do today? Hidden deep within crumbling castles and forgotten monasteries are secrets that modern engineers can hardly believe. They didn't just survive the cold, they mastered it. And the truth about how they did it might change the way you think about modern comfort forever. Imagine a time when winter wasn't an inconvenience. It was a threat. When staying warm meant the difference between life and death. The people of the Middle Ages didn't have furnaces or radiators, but they had something far more valuable: ingenuity. They learned to harness the earth, the sun, the stones beneath their feet, and even the warmth of living creatures. They didn't just fight the cold, they made it work for them. Some medieval homes have been found to have maintained temperatures close to 70 degrees Fahrenheit in the heart of winter. No electricity, no central heating, just knowledge, patience, and an understanding of nature that we've somehow forgotten. It makes you wonder, how did they do it? In the center of every medieval home stood its soul: the hearth. Not tucked away in a corner, but proudly in the middle of the main hall, glowing like a heart that beat for everyone inside. These fires did more than cook food or light the dark. They shaped the architecture around them. The stones beneath absorbed heat during the day, holding it like a secret, and when the flames died, they released it slowly through the night. Some stones stayed warm for 12 hours after the last spark faded. And the smoke? It wasn't waste. It moved slowly through the beams, preserving food, keeping insects away, even strengthening the wood above. Medieval people didn't just build fireplaces. They built living systems of heat and protection. Archaeologists have found floors still blackened by constant warmth. Signs that those spaces could heat an area the size of a modern apartment with nothing more than fire and stone. They didn't need thermostats. They were their own engineers of survival. But warmth in the Middle Ages wasn't only found at home. When the frost crept across the fields and the nights grew long, people came together, literally, to survive. Villages had what they called warming houses, communal fires that burned without pause throughout the winter. Picture it: a wooden hall glowing orange in the night, people wrapped in wool, laughter and voices rising through the smoke as snow falls outside. For some, it was the only warmth they'd feel all season. These places were more than just fires. They were life itself. News was shared, marriages arranged, disputes settled, all beside the same flames that melted frost from boots and warmed cold fingers. Some records even show villages that kept their communal fires alive 24 hours a day, with families taking turns to feed them. It wasn't just about heat. It was about belonging, about knowing that in a world ruled by cold and hunger, someone would always tend the fire when you couldn't. And for those who couldn't reach those fires, there were smaller, more personal miracles. Imagine slipping your hand into a muff and feeling a small sphere of metal radiating warmth. These were called chauffettes. Tiny furnaces filled with hot coals, carried everywhere by nobles and merchants alike. Peasants used iron, the wealthy used silver or gold, but the idea was the same: portable comfort in a freezing world. Archaeologists have found smooth river stones wrapped in cloth, worn by centuries of hands that refused to go numb. Some even had grooves where fingers had rubbed them smooth over time. There's a record from 1422 of a man punished for stealing another's heated stone during a church service. His sentence was poetic. He had to provide warm stones for every parishioner for the rest of winter. Even in punishment, warmth had meaning. It was sacred, a symbol of care and humanity. The people of the Middle Ages didn't just warm their homes. They warmed each other. They turned survival into community, necessity into invention, and hardship into something almost beautiful. But even the best hearth or hand warmer wasn't enough when the frost bit deep. That's when medieval people turned to a far stranger solution. They used living, breathing heaters. Imagine walking into a farmhouse where the wall you sleep beside hums with quiet warmth. Because on the other side, there are cows. It sounds strange to us, but it was brilliant. A single cow produces the same amount of heat as a small space heater, nearly 1,000 BTUs per hour. Medieval builders understood that long before scientists measured it. They built their homes so the living quarters shared a wall with the barn, usually on the north side, where the cold winds blew hardest. The animals' body heat passed through the stones, warming the rooms where families slept. A house filled with cows, sheep, and horses could be 10 degrees warmer than one without them. It wasn't elegant, and the smell must have been terrible. But when winter clawed at the windows, nobody cared. They had turned their livestock into living furnaces. A record from 1382 even listed which animals made the best heaters. Cows were perfect, horses good, chickens nearly useless. There's even mention of a landlord who charged lower rent for houses that didn't share a barn wall. Medieval people didn't waste warmth. They understood its value better than we do today. And while the animals gave heat, the walls themselves learned to multiply it. Long before anyone talked about physics or radiation, medieval builders discovered that light can be bent and heat can be reflected. Inside castles and great halls, polished brass or copper sheets were placed behind the fire to bounce warmth back into the room. Some wealthy lords went further, covering entire walls with shining metal panels that looked like mirrors. They didn't do it for vanity. They did it for survival. Tests on reconstructed medieval reflectors show they could increase room temperatures by as much as 30%. Imagine a fireplace surrounded by curved metal, glowing like the inside of a lantern, pushing heat into every corner. In a few rare castles, even silver-plated walls were used. The chronicles say one French noble claimed he bathed in light and warmth. Maybe he did. He had turned his great hall into a chamber of reflected fire. In monasteries, monks discovered the same secret. They used angled metal plates to direct heat into the infirmary, creating what we would now call heating zones. They named them God's mirrors, though perhaps what they had really found was the mirror of their own intelligence. Still, when the night deepened and the wind screamed outside, nothing mattered more than the bed. And for medieval families, the bed was more than a place to sleep. It was an invention of survival. They created what we might call the first electric blanket, the warming pan. A servant would take a long-handled copper pan, fill it with glowing coals, and slide it between the sheets just before bedtime. The metal hissed softly against the linen, releasing waves of heat. For 2 or 3 hours, the bed became a cocoon of warmth in a frozen room. Archaeologists have found beautifully engraved pans from the 1400s, some with small inscriptions like "Sweet dreams, don't let the ice bite." Even their humor was frozen in time. But not everyone could afford such luxury, so they built beds that kept warmth trapped long after the coals went cold. Heavy curtains surrounded the frame, creating a small chamber where the body's own heat stayed locked inside. These were not decorations. They were practical miracles. Experiments on reconstructed canopy beds have shown that the temperature inside could be 15 degrees warmer than the rest of the room after just 10 minutes. Behind those drawn curtains, families whispered prayers, lovers shared secrets, and old men dreamed while the storm outside screamed in vain. Within the folds of fabric and wood, warmth became private, precious, and deeply human. And yet, the greatest secret of all didn't lie in the hearth or the bed. It came from something far older and more powerful than fire itself: the sun. Medieval builders were masters of the light. They positioned their homes so that the largest windows faced south, catching the low winter rays while avoiding the summer heat. Thick stone walls drank in that sunlight during the day, then released it through the night. It was a natural form of solar heating, centuries before anyone named it. Some castles were angled exactly 17 degrees east of true south, the perfect orientation for maximum light in winter. They didn't know the mathematics, but they could feel the warmth. Even the humblest cottage had its sunlit corner, the place where bread rose, where children played, where hope lived. Their houses didn't fight against nature, they worked with it. And that, perhaps, was their greatest genius. But the sun wasn't the only silent ally they had. Look upward at a medieval home, and you'll see another secret: the thatched roof. To most people today, it just looks quaint or rustic, but in truth it was one of the most brilliant natural insulators ever made. Each roof was woven from tightly packed straw, layer upon layer, creating thousands of tiny air pockets that trapped warmth inside. Tests on surviving thatched houses show that these roofs could keep heat in better than many modern materials, cutting heat loss by nearly 50%. 2 feet thick, soft yet sturdy, they breathed, letting moisture escape without losing warmth. There's an old record from 1397 describing a snowstorm so heavy it buried half a village. Yet those who lived under thatched roofs stayed so warm they had to open their windows in January. Imagine that, opening windows in the Middle Ages while others froze behind cold stone walls. They didn't have technology, they had knowledge, and they used it with grace. And then there was the final marvel, a secret hidden beneath their very feet. Some of the most advanced medieval builders discovered that heat could rise from the floor itself. They would heat large stones in a fire, then slide them beneath the wooden boards of their rooms. Slowly, the warmth spread upward, turning the cold ground into a radiant source of comfort. It was, in essence, underfloor heating. Centuries before electricity, centuries before plumbing, servants rotated the stones every few hours, keeping them hot. In grand houses, there were even special pits built for this purpose. Monks called it God's floor. And when archaeologists reconstructed one of these systems, they found that it could maintain a steady 65 degrees, even when the outside world froze solid. Every flicker of fire, every reflection of light, every carefully placed stone told a story. A story of people who refused to surrender to the cold. They didn't have furnaces or gas. They had ingenuity, community, and courage. They built warmth into the bones of their homes, into the rhythm of their days, into the very way they lived. And now, 800 years later, we sit surrounded by modern technology, flicking switches, turning dials, and still complaining about the cold. Maybe we should look back instead of forward. Maybe the people we call primitive knew something we've lost. That warmth isn't only a temperature. It's an art, a memory, a shared fire that connects one generation to the next. They didn't just survive the winter. They conquered it, with stone, smoke, sunlight, and spirit. And perhaps, in remembering their forgotten methods, we might rediscover something greater. How to live closer to nature, to each other, and to the warmth we've always carried inside. So the next time you feel the chill of winter creeping under your door, think of them. The villagers, the monks, the builders who tamed the frost with nothing but fire and wisdom. Maybe, just maybe, it's time to bring some of their genius back. Minus the barnyard smell, of course. And if stories like this remind you how brilliant the past truly was, stay close. There are countless more secrets from history waiting to be rediscovered.